Hey everybody, it's Mr. Roper here, and I'm going to do a video today to show you the basics of using Adobe AfterEffects. AfterEffects is the industry standard software for creating motion graphics and animations, and it's a lot of fun to work with. When you first start using it, it can seem a little bit daunting, but when you practice with it, it really becomes easy pretty quickly. So let's jump right into it. I've launched Adobe AfterEffects here, and first I'm going to take a look around at how it's set up. I've got my effects controls over on this side. I've got a timeline down at the bottom where I'm going to arrange my different elements. And I've got a whole bunch of effects and presets over here on the right-hand side. Now, if your window doesn't look like mine, you can go up here to the Window tab, select Workspace, and you can reset it to all panels, okay? And by clicking on all panels, it'll bring up all the different little menus and options that you might need for this program, okay? So what I'm gonna do is start off by creating a new composition. And a composition is just a project file in After Effects. So I'm gonna click this, and it's gonna ask me some questions about what it is I wanna make. So first thing, let's just give this a name. I'm gonna be animating a logo that we created for our video game project so that all the pieces come together. So for my composition, I'm just going to call this Frank's logo. And down here under preset, we need to decide what we're making this for, where we're going to watch it. And you can see there's so many different presets, but for most purposes, we're going to be doing something that's going to be shown on a screen. So I could do an HD TV at 1080 pixels, or I could do HDTV at 720 pixels. Let's do a full HD one here. I'm going to do HD 1080. And then I have to decide what kind of frame rate I want, the number of frames per second of animation. So for most things it's going to be shown online, that would be 29.97 or just 30 frames per second, 30 individual drawings for every second. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. And then I'm going to choose a duration for my project. I'm going to make something that's 10 seconds long. So I'll just change this to 10 seconds. And you can see this is organized by hour, minute, seconds, and frames. And then I'm going to pick the background color. I'm just going to use white for mine. So I'll hit OK. And it creates a new blank composition for us that shows up over here in your project window. Now I'm going to be animating a file that I already created in Illustrator. So I'm going to bring that over right now. I'll go File, Import, and I'm going to import a file. I'm going to go to where I've got it saved here, and it's an Adobe Illustrator file of my Frank's Quest logo. And one thing that's really important here is when I was working in Illustrator, I made sure that each piece of this logo was saved on its own layer. So there's a layer for the axes, a layer for the word quest, a layer for Frank's, for his face, and for the rectangle. I also want to import this not as footage, which would be like a video file, but as a composition. And I want it to keep the layer sizes as I originally drew them. So I'm going to bring it in as a composition, and I'm going to hit import. And you'll see that it shows up over here as a file folder that I can open up. And there's all the different layers. There's the rectangle, the word quest, the word Frank, Frank the monster, and his little axes. Okay, so that's great because I can bring each of those layers down onto my timeline and animate them separately. So let's take the rectangle layer. I'm going to drag it down onto my timeline, and you see it pops up right on screen with a little target in the middle of it. This target is called the anchor point. And it's the point at which this thing is going to move around. I can move it side to side, up or down. I can make it bigger or smaller. So it's the center where all of this action is going to take place. Now, for any layer that you bring into After Effects, you can open it up by clicking on this little arrow. Okay, and there's different things that I can change about this object. These are the 5 ways that I can transform it. I can move its anchor point around by pulling on these numbers, and you can see that that little target in the middle will move back and forth or up or down. I can change its position by moving it side to side or up and down. I can change its scale by increasing or decreasing its size. And then I can change its rotation by pulling on this slider here. To go back, I'm just using Control Z. And then finally, I can change its opacity by making it more or less transparent. Okay, these are the 5 basic ways that I can transform this shape. So let's start off with something simple. I'm going to have this rectangle rise up from the bottom of the screen. Okay, so I look at my timeline and you can see it's marked off in seconds, 1, 2, 3, etc. And in between those seconds, it's marked off in frames. So if I zoom in here a little bit using this slider at the bottom, you can see that this 1 second is made up of 10, 20, 30 frames of animation. Okay, so let's take this shape and I'm going to keyframe it. First thing I'm going to do is click the anchor point, and I'm going to use this slider to move my rectangle off screen. Okay, I've moved it over here. At 0 seconds, I don't see anything on my screen. Now, at 1 second, I'm going to have this guy move back to the middle of the screen. So I'm just pulling on this number, the pixel number here for its position, until it moves back to the center of the screen. And I can check it by moving my playhead back and forth. Okay, you'll see that it left these 2 little diamond shapes called keyframes on my timeline that tell After Effects where this thing should be. At 0 seconds, it should be out here. At 1 second, it should be right there. And that's the basics of how you animate everything in Adobe After Effects. Okay, I'm going to close this layer. And now from 1 second, I need to have the next piece of my animated logo come in. So the next thing that's going to appear is the word Frank. I'm going to bring this layer down and drop it directly on top. And you can see that here's my word Frank. I can move it around. I want it to appear basically like right there in the center. And I want this one to drop in from the top of the screen straight down. So I'm going to open up its layer. I'm going to set a keyframe for position. And at 1 second on my timeline, I want this to be up off the screen. At 1 second plus 10 frames, I want it to drop down into that spot right there. Okay, so let's check it. I'm going to roll it back. Comes on, Frank's drops in. Looks good. Okay, now let's have it do one other thing. Once it drops into place, I want Frank's to kind of pulse, get a little bit bigger and then smaller again. So now I'm going to keyframe its scale. I'm going to click the stopwatch. When it first drops down, it's going to be at 100% scale. I'm going to move forward a couple frames, make it a little bit bigger, move forward a couple of frames, and drop it back to 100%. Okay, so now it'll pulse a little bit. When it hits, it's going to get bigger and then smaller and stay in place. That looks great. Okay, let's close this up and let's add in our next layer, which is the word quest. I'm going to drag it down, open it up, and let's see, I have something coming in from the side. I have something dropping in from the top. Why don't I have the word quest grow from nothing into its full size? So here at this point of the animation, I'm going to click the stopwatch for scale, and I'm going to scale it down to 0%. Or I can just click it and type in 0. Okay. Then I'm going to move forward a few frames, and I'm going to have it get really large, maybe like 120% or thereabouts. Then I'm going to move forward a couple more frames and have it shrink back down to 100%. Okay, so now I get this effect. Slide in, drop in, quest gets bigger, and then shrinks into its normal size. Awesome. Okay, a couple more pieces here. I'm going to drop in Frank himself, so I'll drag him down. And for Frank, I actually want him hidden behind his name. So I'm going to move his layer behind the word Frank. Okay, that hides him a little bit. And I want to have him pop up from behind the words. So let's keyframe his position. First thing I'm going to do is kind of center him here a little bit. And I'm going to hit keyframe. And when he first appears, I want him to be behind the word Frank, but then I want him to pop up like this and then drop down to settle right behind the word. Okay, so let's check that. He starts there and then he rises up and then pops back down. Okay, now you can see the problem here is he's already on screen when he shouldn't be. So that's where these bars on your timeline come in place. If I don't want Frank to appear until this first point, I can take the beginning of this bar and drag it back so that he doesn't even show up on the screen until right there. Okay. And that's working okay, but I can still see him peeking out from behind here. So I think I'm going to need to keyframe his opacity. Let's set the stopwatch and we'll say at this point he should be invisible. It's 0 opacity. Then by the time he gets to like right here, I want him to be at full opacity. So I'm going to turn that all the way up to 100%. So now he'll be invisible at the beginning and then he'll rise up at full transparency. Okay, great. All right, the last thing I have is the axes that are going to fly on screen. So for this one, after Frank pops into place, I'm going to drag the axes down onto the timeline. And I'm going to keyframe two things about these. I want them to fly on screen and they're spinning. So I'm going to keyframe their position and their rotation. So at this point in the screen, they should be off screen. Okay. I want them hidden off here to the side. And then I want them over the course of a few frames here to fly onto the screen. But I also want them to be spinning. So that's where I'm going to change this rotation. I'm going to just crank it up here so that they spin around maybe 4 times. Okay, let's put 4 times like that. And we'll just check our rotation. Oh, that's looking good. They spin on, bling, and then they land right in place. They're also a little bit too big. So I think what I want to do is turn their scale down just a little bit so they fit right in there. Perfect. Okay, let's check out our whole animation. I'm going to dial it back. I'll close up this layer, press my space bar. Zoop, 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 bing. Awesome. It's looking really good. Now this all happens in just a matter of a couple seconds. You can see that the whole animation is pretty much completed by about 3 seconds on the screen. So if I want to do something with this whole group now, I'm going to do a technique called precomposing. I'm going to grab all of my layers, right-click them, and choose Precompose. Okay. And I don't need to name this. You can if you want. I could call this Frank logo now that it's all together, and I'll hit OK. And what you can see is it squeezed all of those letters together into one group. Now, don't think that you've lost your layers. If you ever need to go back and change anything, you just double-click this icon, and you see it opens up a new tab with all of your layers and all of the keyframes that you made. It basically is just grouping everything so it becomes easier to manage. So now that I'm at 3 seconds, let's keyframe this whole group. And I'm going to have it just slowly scale up to fill the screen. So at here, it's at 100%. By 4 seconds, I want it to grow and fill the screen like that. So let's check it out. Pieces fly on. Logo grows and enlarges. Looks great. I'm happy with this animation now. So let's end it right at 5 seconds. I'm going to put my playhead here at 5 seconds. And I'm going to grab this little blue handle over here for my work area and drag it down to 5 seconds. I'll right click it and I'm going to say trim this down to 5 seconds. Okay, so now my whole project, instead of being 10, is only 5. That's perfect. All right, I'm all done. So I'm going to go ahead and save my project. We'll go out to File, Save, and we'll just put it on here as Frank's logo animated. And that's going to save my After Effects project. So if I ever want to come back and change anything, I can open up the project. But if I want to export it, I have to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to go to File, Export, and I'm going to add it to the Adobe Media Encoder queue. Okay, let's click this button. And what that's going to do is open up an entirely different Adobe program called Media Encoder. Media Encoder basically takes any project that you have and can save it out in different file formats. So if you make a video and you want it to be ready for a cell phone, a YouTube video, an animated GIF, you can set it to export as all of those different file types. Okay, so Media Encoder is going to open up for me, and we'll give it just a second here. It's going to load up my animated project. I currently have 2 other projects there from something I was working on earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those out. Yeah, take these out. And there's my Frank's logo. Okay, perfect. So now I got to tell it, how do I want to save this? Well, I want to do it as an animated GIF. So I'm going to open up this menu, choose Animated GIF. Then I'm going to come over here to the output file and tell Media Encoder where to save it. I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it Frank's Logo GIF. Hit save. And then finally, I'm going to hit play. And you'll see it down here, this little progress bar, as it starts to process your file. Give it a couple seconds. It should animate pretty fast because it's not a very big project. And when it's done, you'll have a GIF saved on your desktop. You can see it actually working down here as it goes through and saves each frame one at a time. Let's give it a second here. Awesome. So now that it's done, it's giving me a little check mark. I'm going to go to my desktop and okay, there's my file. I'm going to double click it and boom, I've got an animated GIF of my video game logo. And it will just loop infinitely now that you've made it. This looks awesome. Now I've got it, I can turn in or share with my friends or even post it on social media. Okay, so that's the basics of how you can work with Adobe After Effects to animate anything you want. In the weeks ahead, we're going to get it more and more complex, animating some of our characters and our game levels. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Experiment, have fun, see what you can come up with. All right, talk to you soon.